think I have, no, I think I've come to each of these that Karen has put on. And it's very heartwarming, I have to say, to come back. It's nice having a relationship, not just give a talk. And, when she asked me, like, what did I want to talk about? And I had really no idea. I mean, it just, I don't know, if you're like a professional speaker, they just kind of wind you up and, put you in front of people and they just hope stuff comes out. Ram Dass used to refer to himself as rent-a-mouth. That was how he languaged himself, rent-a-mouth, and it's an interesting description. But I told Karen that I would talk a little bit about the relationship between happiness and Stephen Covey's work on the 7 habits of highly effective people, and probably add a little bit about the forgiveness work that I do. Unfortunately, having done this for a long time, like I'm one of those older folks who was interested in happiness studies before anything like that existed. I mean, I can tell you, wandering around Stanford's campus and trying to get somebody interested in the idea of happiness, it was really strange. I remember literally just about all the academic departments at the school in like 2005 and 2006 said, why would anybody study this? Like, it's not science, it's not important. And I remember looking at them and thinking, well, don't you want to go home and enjoy yourself? But that was not sufficient. Let me share one thing that is challenging from the point of view of somebody who's been at this for a long time. It's not easy. And I want to make that really clear. None of this is easy. It may be simple, but it's not easy. And you want to be really careful that you don't trivialize this, that you don't make it like a simple thing to be bandied around. This may be, among with 1 or 2 other things, the deepest questions that human beings ask of life. How can I possibly be happy in it? You look around, you still see people in masks, so you recognize what we've been dealing with for 2 years. On the way here, I was reading some of the latest climate science stuff, and there's both good news and bad news. I mean, the good news is we're probably not going to destroy the planet. The bad news is we're going to get really close. But I mean, how do you become happier in a world which is filled with suffering, which has no end of loss built into the very system of it? And as the Buddhists remind us all the time, everything changes. Everything. Everything changes. We change. People around us change. Environment changes. We're a world awash in movement and change. So how do you become happy in that? That is not an easy question. I'm not trying. I'm really telling you one of the deepest things that I've recognized after being in this work and in the personal practice 25 more years or more years. Now, the fact that it's not easy is actually what makes it so precious. If it wasn't easy, wouldn't mean that much. And that's one of the things that we don't want to grasp. The really important things in life are challenges. They're hard. You think it's easy to make a life partnership with somebody? Do you think that what it takes inside of us to adapt to how nutty another human being is and have them adapt to how absolutely batshit we are? Do you think that's easy? But that's another one of the deepest questions that we have. Like, how do we connect to people when we're all idiosyncratic, a little nuts, and difficult? But it's the same thing with life. It's idiosyncratic, it's weird, it's difficult, and yet it's the opportunity that we have to try to navigate this experience as best we can and enjoy it. I remember once I gave a talk at a Spirit Rock, one of the leading meditation centers in Northern California, one of the Buddhist centers. And it was, I think I was talking with Rick Hansen. The two of us were doing a workshop thing together. And I've had a meditation practice since I was in college, which is quite a long time ago. And trust me, it's still just a practice. It's like, you don't get there with meditation. But I remember I was sitting there, and I was watching all these like Buddhists sitting up like really straight, because they were showing everybody how Buddhist they were. And it was like Spirit Rock, and they're all sitting straight, and everybody's like, yeah, look at my back. And I'm sitting there trying to tell people to forgive, but I'm looking at all these straight-sitting Buddhists, and I say out loud, I've been meditating for 30 years. It's hard. And all the little straight-sitting Buddhists went, yeah, it's hard. Because change is slow. And it requires lots of practice. That's the thing. It requires lots of practice. So whatever you get out of this, whatever tips and strategies and ideas and directions and goals, those are all wonderful. But when you get home, you're going to have to do a lot of practice. And that's the hard part, because habits are there already. Like, you already have lots of habits. Like, you may want to be a really nice person, but the minute somebody cuts you off on the freeway, you're like giving them the bird and following after them, and then you wonder, like, where did my human beingness go? Well, it's a habit. Last night, a day and a half ago, when my friend drove me to the airport, he was telling me a story about when he taught his son to drive. And when he taught his son to drive, they're driving along, I live right outside of San Francisco, they're driving along on the freeway, and somebody cuts the kid off. He's like 16. And the driver cuts him off and then goes ahead, and then the kid steps on the gas pedal and chases after the car. He's 16, and gives the guy the finger. And the dad's looking at him and says, what the heck did you just do? And the kid turns to him and says, but Dad, that's what you do. He said that with a straight face. Dad, that's what you do. Why are you giving me grief? I'm watching you to learn how to live. That's habit. We have so many habits. The human mind, the human body, the human nervous system wants to automate as much of your behavior as it possibly can. It doesn't want you thinking much. For survival benefit, it's just in case there's some dramatic danger looking or something really exciting and new. You want to have your attention free so that you can attend to either excitement or danger. And so it wants you to automate as much as you can. So we have so many habits. And we don't even know how many habits we have until we try to change one of them. Seriously, that's when you realize what an ossified, habit-bound human being you are until you try to change one. So you promise your partner that you will never put the dishes away in the wrong spot, and then the next day you put the dishes away in the wrong spot, and the partner says, "What the hell's wrong with you?" And you go, "Oh, shit, that's right. It's just a habit." We have so many habits, and the thing that makes happiness so difficult, and the thing that makes human change so difficult, and the thing that makes us struggle with this, is that you're practicing all the time. That's what we don't realize. So every single minute of every single day, you're practicing your habits. And so when you try to change something, it's hard to really fathom how much effort you have already put in to create a dimension and a direction for your brain to operate on. You are practicing all the time. All the time. It's very hard to change something that has so many grooves already bound up here because of practice. The value or the evidence is that it becomes very useful to become aware of your habits. But even becoming aware of your habits is hard. This is my talk. It's not easy. You have habits, and just noticing them is hard. Just becoming aware of what it is you're already doing is hard to do. To heck with changing it. So there are basic neurological existential challenges that make our happiness harder to do. I'm going to give you a guided practice for a moment on one of our most difficult destructive habits, which is the work that I do is on forgiveness. And then I'm going to try to relate that to Stephen Covey's work. But if I could ask you all to take a minute and just close your eyes, not even a whole minute. I have 40 minutes for all of this, so just close your eyes, please. And just settle into your seat and just see, in the context of this environment, can you relax? Can you tell yourself that you're safe enough, that you're loved enough to relax, to be vulnerable? That's not easy in and of itself. And then if you know you're safe, if you're able to breathe gently into and out of your belly, that's how you know you're safe. So if you can take a somewhat deep breath and have your abdomen expand when you breathe, that means you're safe enough. If you don't need to move your chest and your shoulders, and you don't need to tighten up your shoulders, you're relaxed. So you want to inhale and gently expand your abdomen, and exhale and contract your abdomen. And then I want you to ask yourself one question. In like the last, say, 48 hours, who's been kind to me? You want to look at your last couple of days and slow the tape down if you can, to ask yourself one simple question: where have I seen kindness? Did anybody say a nice word to me? Anybody listen to me complain? Anybody help me in any way? Anybody do my laundry? Anything. You want to look, you want to slow it down so you find kindness. And then you want to focus on one aspect of kindness that you've experienced, just one. And from inside of you say a sincere, heartfelt thank you. From inside of you, you want to just say, as close as you can to your own center, thank you. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for caring. Thank you for whatever. But thank you. And then let that go. And take a breath and gently allow your eyes to open. So one of the habits that we have that harms us all, and part of it's biological, is that we pay more attention to what people don't do for us than what they do for us. We're much more interested in human unkindness than kindness. And we tend to notice what's missing more than what's there. That's our tendency. So we misperceive the world pretty dramatically because of that. We don't see things clearly at all. We tend to notice more when even people who love us don't do what they're supposed to do than the 87 times in a row they did what they're supposed to do. We don't notice when people might hold the door open for us or might stop so we can walk through. We don't notice that. But if they act in a rude way, we're right there. With people we're close to, our nervous systems are wired to take for granted what they offer. And so we don't see them anymore. We don't see them who they really are. And one of the most fascinating results of some research in social science on marriage is that when marriages go south, what actually happens is we don't see our partner's goodwill any longer. That's been experimentally verified. Like they'll take videotapes of people arguing and talking, couples, and the distressed couples, they won't notice the kindness. The happier couples will notice the kindness, will notice the soft words, will notice the attention. And what's fascinating is when they have objective observers. This is what's so interesting. The objective observers find the kindness. It's the distressed couples that are no longer seeing things clearly. Like our nervous system and our culture wants us to believe that negativity is real, that it's more true, that you got to be on guard all the time. It turns out, and the data is, I don't know the exact data, but some like 95, 96% of interactions with people are positive. In particular with people we're in good relationship with, they're always doing nice things, and we don't see it. And when two people fail to see it, the relationship dissolves. But the objective observer was siding with the kindness. And the people who were in good relationship, they were the ones that saw things more accurately. Now that's a startling piece of data. but that's a habit we can change. That's one of the habits we can change. So when I was looking at Stephen Covey's work and his 7 habits for highly effective people, his first habit is be proactive. That's his first habit, which means you're responsible for you. Like that's the first and ground foundational habit. It's called be proactive. It means you are responsible for what you do and what you say and where you go and the experiences that you have put yourself in. That effective people own their behavior and their choices. So one of the simple habits in terms of being proactive for our happiness is notice the good that is already there in the people that are with you already. Because the interesting thing is the people that are already there, we have already chosen. Like they're there because we put them there. So our proactivity, our owning our own life is, yeah, they're there. And if I want to be happy, I'm more to appreciate my choice. But it comes from a deep conviction that I'm responsible for my happiness, not them. So I have to own my choice, which is my partner's there, my friends are there, my job is there, because I chose it. I remember when I used to do couples therapy, I don't do so much anymore, but I remember being surprised at how venomous couples could be when they'd come into therapy. Like I was actually surprised that 2 people could be so nasty in front of a stranger. No, I'm serious. It's like people would come in, they have no idea who I am, and I'm like a doctor or somebody, and they sit down and act like a monster. And 2 people acting like monsters in a room is not pretty. But I'm just sitting there going, like, didn't your parents teach you anything? No, I'm honestly like, what? Were you raised on I don't know, and they'd come in and they'd dump, and they'd be horribly nasty to each other. And I, in my mind, would think this. So if this is how you treat the person you made your deepest personal commitment to in your whole life, how do you treat everybody else? Worse? Like this is somebody you pledged, sickness and health, richer or poorer, whatever. And you're a maniac. Being proactive means I own my choices. I don't blame anybody. I choose. I don't have to do much. I choose. I don't have to go to work. I choose to. I don't have to give a talk. I choose to. I don't have to call my partner. I choose to. I don't have to like everything. I choose to participate. You know, there's a very impressive thing that Stephen Covey uses in one of his coaching sessions about a man comes to him and says that he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't love his wife anymore. And the man says, I have 3 kids, so this is not that good, you know? And Stephen Covey says, well, you don't love your wife. What does that mean? He says, well, I don't feel any love for her. And Stephen Covey says, but love isn't a feeling. It's a verb. When you love, you do. That's what choice is. That's what proactivity is. If you love somebody, it has nothing to do with the way you feel. It has to do with how you act. Because you could sit there and feel anything you want, and they can go hungry. I mean, feeling is not that important. If it motivates you to action, then it's important. But he talks to this guy and he says, well, The guy says, well, I don't love her anymore. So Stephen Covey says, well, love her. The guy says, you're not hearing me, buddy. I don't feel love for her anymore. And Stephen Covey says, well, then choose to act in a way that's loving. Because that's what love is. It's decisions based on responsibility, based on choice. You don't have to. You can walk away. But it has nothing to do with how you feel. Or it may have something to do with how you feel. But his basic understanding is that effective people take responsibility for what they're doing. Like, I can choose to end a marriage. But who cares how I feel? I mean, I care how I feel, but it's not that important source of information. How do I behave? If I no longer choose to remain, then I own that. It's not your fault. Not at all your fault. None of it's your fault. I'm choosing. I chose to join. I chose to sever. It's very interesting because one of the exercises he does is, and maybe I'll ask you all to do it. So just, this is not closed-eyed. Let me do this as open-eyed. Just for a moment, stop and think of a situation that you're in the midst of, like anything. I mean, this isn't psychotherapy. This is just like, a 2-minute exercise. Think of a situation, make it with somebody you're in relationship with that ain't totally satisfying. Like, just pick a relationship experience that doesn't fully work. And just ask yourself a second of, how have I blamed them for this problem? Like, what have I said to myself to make it their fault? For good or for bad, this is the kind of inner work that it takes for us to be happier. To see who we are with some accuracy. Like, what did I do to transfer responsibility for my life to them? And now the second part of this is just ask yourself, in what way have I chosen to be in this relationship? In what form have I chosen this? Like, is it a coworker? Well, I choose to work here. Is it a family member? I choose to show up. A friend? I chose them as a friend. And then ask yourself one third question. If somehow I were able to open my heart right this moment and see them in the most loving, benign way possible, what would that look like? If I were capable of coming into my own heart, opening my heart, because it's not about them, what would they look like from the point of view of my open heart? So that's a moment of being proactive. I have a problem. I see where I've put the blame on them, and it may partly be them. But then I come back inside and recognize that I chose to be here. I chose to engage, and I have bandwidth and choice as to how I perceive them. I have that. It's in me. The proactive space is in here. Now, that may not be sufficient to reduce the conflict, but it brings us to the place where, again, we have some control, which is us. It's about, what can I do to influence my life in a way that serves my deepest self. You know, some of Stephen Covey's inspiration is the book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And Stephen Covey relates pretty regularly, or did while he was alive, Frankl's recognition he was naked in a frigidly cold cell in Nazi Germany extermination camp. And he had reached the end of his rope, that he had been in a death camp, that he had helped bury the bodies after they had been gassed, and that he literally couldn't take any more. And what Frankl did was look at this, because he was literally losing his center, or whatever was left. And he said, the only thing that I have left, the only freedom I have left, is to ask myself, who owns me? Do they or do I? Like, they can torture me, they can kill me, they can put me in the worst possible experience, but I still retain a sliver of choice as to how I react to that. And he reached bottom, understood that choice never goes away, came out from that, and then started to help other inmates and camp people, because he understood what he said was, this is one freedom that nobody can take from me. Nobody. The freedom to choose. And the freedom to own my choices. So when you're looking at effective people, you're looking at happier people. Effective means you're good in relationship because you prioritize it. You bring a good self to work rather than an angry, pissed off, blaming self. Effective is a really nice surrogate intermediary for the value that happier people can bring to this world. You know, the data is clear, and if you've been sitting here for a day and a half, I'm sure you've heard it, that happiness contributes more to success than success contributes to happiness. I mean, there's good data on that. That happier people do more. They're more effective. The opposite of choice, the opposite of freedom, and this is where it so touches my forgiveness work, is when we claim the victim status. I'm not responsible for how I feel. I'm not responsible for what I do. Somebody forced me to. Covey postulates that as like 180 from effective. Me, as a forgiveness teacher for decades, will say that victim or helpless self-pity is very useful short-term. So I need to make that very clear. If really bad things happen, it's absolutely useful to fall apart and claim no responsibility and be overwhelmed, because your brain can't handle certain changes and challenges, and it needs time and space to integrate. And that's what useful victimhood is. Beyond that, it's almost orthogonal to being effective. You can choose all sorts of responses, and you can choose all sorts of patterns and habits. But when you choose the habit of, it's not my fault, it's not my responsibility, it's somebody else needs to change, then you build in a deeper level of helplessness. That's the cost of it. You build in deeper helplessness. And what Covey, and to me, the essence of this positive psych world is, we are responsible for making ourselves as happy and as useful people as we can bring to this planet. Like, that's our opportunity here on Earth. That's our job, so to speak. But it's not easy, and it takes effort, and it takes work, and it takes monitoring our patterns. Let me just give you one more practice. My time will be over in 5 minutes, but I want to give you one more practice to do, because Covey's first step is be proactive. Covey's second step is start with the end in mind. So I want to do a imagery practice with that, okay? Would start with the end in mind, which is his second habit. So if you'd all please close your eyes just a moment. And take a breath or two. And relax your abdomen, please. And let go of physical tension in your shoulders primarily if you can. Relax your shoulders. We hold a lot there. Relax your shoulders. Relax your belly. And then I want you to imagine, I want you to imagine that it's the end of your life. And you want to imagine that either your children or your best friend, they're talking about you, knowing that you have very little time to live. What do you want them to say about you? What do you want to hear from someone who's deeply important to you? What do you want them to say about how you lived and who you were? And then let that go. And just take a breath. And gently allow your eyes to open. So I've done an exercise like this or similar with college students, with business people. It's not unusual. But it's a simple and deep reflection of start with the end in mind. Like, how would you even know what a success would look like for the kind of person we want to be without projecting somewhere out and saying, what do I want it to look like a year from now, or 5 years from now, or at the end? What do I want them to say? What do I want to have written about me? What would I want the melange of my life to look like? The genius of these simple 7 habits is it's up to us where we go. And the second habit of start with the end in mind is where do we want to end up? I do this training in corporate sites. You know, they have me come in and talk to newbies who are just starting in the job. And, you know, I'll do something like this. Well, let's say 18 months from now. What do you want your boss to say about you? What do you want your coworker to say about you? If it all worked out exactly the way you wanted, what do you want to hear? That's how, in some ways, we connect with what do we want. And then it's unfortunately, like, more than we care to admit, our responsibility to try to help ourselves get there. That's the not so pretty part. You know, you picture it, it's a goal, and then we have the work of making it happen. Anyway, my time is up. I thank you very much for your attention.